The sequins on my costume caught the stadium lights, sending thousands of rainbow reflections dancing across the sambadrome. 78 years old, and here I was, elevated 15 feet above the ground, on the most spectacular float of the night. My arms outstretched in the traditional samba pose that had been as natural to me as breathing for 6 decades. The roar of the crowd was deafening. 120,000 people chanting my name. Dona Maria! Dona Maria! Below me, 600 dancers moved in perfect synchrony, their costumes a blur of emerald green and gold, the colors of Imperio Tropical, the samba school that had made me their Grand Marshal, the school that had been my fiercest competitor for decades, the school that had recognized what my own had forgotten, that samba lives in the soul, not in the birth certificate. 3 months earlier, I had stood in a very different position, in the cramped office of Académicos do Ritmo, the samba school I had helped found in 1963, listening to words that cut deeper than any knife. Dona Maria, we value your contributions over the years, but the committee has decided to go in a different direction for this year's parade, Paulo said, not quite meeting my eyes. Paulo, the boy I had taught to samba when he was 5 years old, now the 45-year-old president of our school. Different direction? I repeated, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. We need to appeal to younger audiences. The judges are looking for innovation, energy, youth, he trailed off, finally glancing up at me. And I represent none of those things? I asked, though it wasn't really a question. The technical aspects of the parade are becoming more demanding. The costumes are heavier, the choreography more athletic. We're concerned about your ability to keep up. I looked down at my hands. Brown, weathered, marked with age spots, yes, but still strong. Hands that had sewn countless costumes, played the tambourine until they bled during rehearsals. Hands that had lifted my children and grandchildren to see over the crowds at their first carnival parades. I see, I said simply, though what I saw was betrayal wrapped in the thin veneer of concern. And what role did you envision for me instead? Paulo brightened, clearly relieved I wasn't making a scene. We'd like you to join the Council of Elders. You'd sit in the VIP section, be recognized during the opening ceremony. Sit? I interrupted. You want me to sit and watch? It's an honorary position, Dona Maria. Many of our founders would be grateful for such recognition. I stood up slowly, gathering my dignity around me like a cloak. For 60 years, I have given my sweat, my tears, and my blood to Académicos do Ritmo. I was here before we had costumes, when we practiced in the street because we had no headquarters. I sold pastéis door to door to buy our first drums. I taught your mother to samba, Paulo, and then I taught you. And we're eternally grateful, he began. But I held up my hand. I have never sat during carnival, I continued. Not when I was 9 months pregnant with twins. Not when I had pneumonia in '85. Not even the year after my Antonio died, though my heart was broken. And I will not sit this year because you think I am too old. I walked to the door, my back straight, my head high. Académicos do Ritmo was built on respect for tradition. Remember that when you're chasing your innovation? As I stepped out into the bright Rio sunshine, I had no idea what would come next. For 60 years, my identity had been intertwined with the green and white colors of Académicos. Carnival was 5 months away, and for the first time since I was 18 years old, I had no role to play. What I didn't know then, what none of us knew, was that someone else had been watching. Someone who understood that in samba, as in life. It's not the years that matter, but the passion you bring to every step. My name is Maria Santos. I am 78 years old, widow of Antonio Santos, mother of 4, grandmother of 11, great-grandmother of 3. I have danced in 60 Rio carnivals. And this is the story of how I became the oldest Grand Marshal in the history of the greatest show on earth. Not despite my age, but because of it. The walk home from the Academicos headquarters that day was the longest of my life. Our modest house in Villa Isabel had never seemed so far away, though it was barely 15 blocks. Each step felt heavy, as if my feet suddenly remembered every samba they had ever danced. I didn't cry. Not yet. There would be time for tears later, in private. On the streets of Rio, I had my dignity to maintain. People greeted me as I passed. Boa tarde, Dona Maria, with the respect I had earned over decades. These were my neighbors, many of whom had grown up watching me lead our community's samba school to glory, year after year. What would they think when they discovered I had been cast aside? In Rio, especially in the traditional neighborhoods, your samba school is your identity, your extended family. Being removed from Academicos wasn't just losing a hobby. It was like being disowned. When I finally reached our little blue house with its wrought iron gate and the bougainvillea Antonio had planted 30 years ago, I allowed myself to sit heavily on the front step. Only then did the tears come, silent and hot on my cheeks. Vovo, is that you crying? I looked up to see my granddaughter Luisa peering around the gate. At 23, she was the image of me in my youth. The same wide-set eyes, the same curve to her lips, the same natural grace in her movements. But where I had been all fire and impulse, Luisa was thoughtful, strategic. She was studying business administration at the university, the first in our family to pursue higher education. It's nothing, querida, I said, quickly wiping my face. Just an old woman being sentimental. Luisa sat beside me, her young shoulder pressing against mine, in silent support. Vovo, you've never been just anything in your life. What happened? The story spilled out of me then. Paolo's condescending tone, the dismissal of my physical abilities, the insulting offer to sit and watch. With each detail, Luisa's expression darkened. They can't do this to you, she said when I finished. It's discrimination. It's life, Mina Filha. I interrupted gently. Nothing lasts forever. 60 years of dedication should count for something. You're still the best dancer in the school. Everyone knows it. I smiled at her loyalty. I'm good, yes, but I'm not the same as I was at 20 or 40 or even 60. That's the truth. So what? Carnival isn't just about athletic ability. It's about soul, about tradition, about carrying the culture forward. Luisa stood up, pacing in front of me with the indignation of youth. This is wrong, Vovo. We should fight it. How? Force them to let me parade? Samba with gritted teeth among people who don't want me there? I shook my head. No, that's not how I want to spend what might be my last carnival. Luisa stopped pacing and looked at me. Really looked at me. In that penetrating way she had. This won't be your last carnival, Vovo. I promise you that. I patted the step beside me, and she sat down again. Let it go, querida. Some battles can't be won. You didn't raise us to give up, she said stubbornly. You always told us that samba is about finding joy, even in the hardest times. About transforming pain into beauty. Her words echoed something Antonio used to say. My beloved husband had been gone for 5 years now, but sometimes I still heard his voice so clearly it was as if he were standing beside me. He had been my partner in everything. In life, in parenting, in samba. We had met at Carnival when we were both 18, and for 55 years we had danced side by side. What would Vovo say if he saw you giving up? Luisa pressed, knowing exactly how to reach me. I closed my eyes and could almost hear Antonio's deep laugh. He would tell me to hold my head high and dance anyway, I admitted. But where, Luisa? Academicos was my home. There are other schools, she said simply. The thought had not even occurred to me. In the competitive world of Rio's samba schools, loyalty was everything. No one switched allegiances, especially not founders. especially not after 60 years. That would be unthinkable, I said slowly. More unthinkable than not dancing at all, Louisa challenged. More unthinkable than letting them erase 60 years of your contribution. Before I could answer, the gate creaked open wider, and my daughter Teresa appeared, carrying grocery bags. At 55, Teresa was my practical child, the one who had taken over the household after Antonio died, who made sure I took my medications and kept my doctor appointments. "What are you two conspiring about?" she asked, noting our serious expressions. "Academicos has kicked Vovo out of the parade," Louisa announced before I could soften the blow. Teresa nearly dropped the groceries. "They did what?" As Louisa recounted the story with even more indignation than before, I watched my daughter's face. Unlike my granddaughter, Teresa had never been passionate about samba. She appreciated it, respected it as our family tradition. But her true loves were her nursing career and her church choir. Still, she understood what academicos meant to me. "Mama, I'm so sorry," she said when Louisa finished. "That's cruel, after everything you've given them. It's business," I said, trying to sound philosophical. "The parade is big money now, not like in our day. They need to win, and they think they can win without the woman who choreographed their only 3 championships." Teresa shook her head in disbelief. Pride comes before a fall. As we moved inside to prepare dinner, the conversation shifted to other topics. Teresa's patience, Louisa's upcoming exams, my youngest grandson's football tournament, but I caught them exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking. And later I heard them whispering in the kitchen. I went to bed early that night, suddenly exhausted by the day's events. As I lay in the darkness, I allowed myself to imagine a carnival without me in it. For the first time in 60 years, I would be a spectator, not a participant. The thought was so painful I had to press my hand against my chest, as if I could physically hold my heart together. "What should I do, Antonio?" I whispered to the empty side of the bed. "How do I let go of something that has been my life for so long?" In the silence, I remembered our last carnival together, when Antonio was already weak from the cancer that would take him 3 months later. He had insisted on participating, though he could barely walk. "Samba is life, Maria," he had told me. "As long as I can still breathe, I will dance." With that memory warming me, I finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that across the city, wheels were already in motion that would change everything. The next morning, I woke with a determination that surprised me. Perhaps it was Antonio's memory, or Louisa's fierce loyalty, or simply my own stubborn nature, but I refused to let Paolo's dismissal define the end of my carnival story. I dressed carefully in a crisp white blouse and flowing skirt, my teaching outfit, and took the bus to the community center in Madureira, where I had led samba classes for neighborhood children every Saturday for the past 30 years. If academicos no longer wanted me, at least I could continue passing on our traditions to the next generation. The community center was a simple building with peeling paint and mismatched chairs. But when filled with the energy of children learning to samba, it transformed into a palace of culture. As I approached, I heard the familiar rhythms of the bateria, the percussion section, already warming up. The sound lifted my spirits immediately. Inside, about 20 children, aged 6 to 16, were stretching and chatting excitedly. When they saw me, they rushed over, surrounding me with their energy and affection. "Dona Maria! Did you bring the new costumes? Dona Maria! Can we try the new step today? Dona Maria! My mother said you're the best samba teacher in all of Rio." Their enthusiasm was the perfect balm for my wounded pride. Here, at least, my age was not a liability, but an asset. I was the keeper of traditions, the living link to Carnival's past. Yes to the costumes, yes to the new step. And tell your mother thank you for the compliment. I laughed, setting down my bag of hand-sewn practice skirts and headpieces. "Now everyone in position. We have work to do." For the next 2 hours, I lost myself in the joy of teaching. We practiced the basic samba step, then more complex combinations. I demonstrated each move, my body responding with the muscle memory built over decades. Yes, my knees protested more than they once had. Yes, I needed to catch my breath between demonstrations. But the fundamental grace, the connection between music and movement, remained undiminished. As the children practiced a particularly challenging sequence, I noticed a man watching from the doorway. Taller, distinguished, with salt and pepper hair and an expensive watch that seemed out of place in our humble surroundings. I didn't recognize him, which was unusual. I knew most people in the neighborhood. When our eyes met, he nodded respectfully but didn't leave. Curious, I made my way over to him while the children continued practicing. "Can I help you, senor?" I asked. "Forgive the intrusion, Dona Maria," he said, his deep voice carrying the polished accent of Rio's wealthy South Zone. "I'm Carlos Mendez." The name registered immediately. Carlos Mendez, president of Imperio Tropical, Academico's most formidable rival for the past 20 years. What was he doing in our community center? "I know who you are, Senor Mendez," I replied cautiously. "What brings you to Madureira?" He gestured toward the practicing children. "I came to see if the rumors were true. If Maria Santos, the heart and soul of Academicos do Ritmo, was really teaching in a community center while her school prepares for carnival without her." The bluntness of his statement stung, but I maintained my composure. News travels fast in the samba world. Too fast to outrun injustice, apparently, he said, his eyes kind despite his formal manner. "May I speak with you privately when your class is finished? I have a proposition that might interest you." Intrigued despite my wariness, I agreed. "We finish at noon. There's a cafe across the street." He nodded and slipped away as quietly as he had appeared, leaving me to wonder what possible proposition the president of Imperio Tropical could have for me. When the class ended and the children had been collected by their parents, I made my way to the cafe. A simple place with plastic chairs and the best pão de queijo in the neighborhood. Carlos Mendez was already there, looking somewhat out of place in his tailored shirt among the working-class patrons. "Dona Maria." He stood as I approached, pulling out a chair for me with old-fashioned courtesy. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. Curiosity got the better of me," I admitted, sitting down. "It's not every day that the president of Imperio Tropical watches my children's class." He smiled, the expression warming his formal demeanor. "I didn't come to see the children, though they're clearly well taught. I came to see you." "Me? Why?" "Because I've admired your work for 40 years, he said simply. "Because I was in the Sambadrome in 1983 when you led Academicos to their first championship with choreography that revolutionized how we approach the parade. Because every year since, I've studied how you blend tradition with innovation." I was speechless. Imperio Tropical had won the championship 5 times in the past decade, eclipsing Academicos' earlier glory. Their productions were lavish, technically perfect, and their president had been studying my work? That's very flattering, Senor Mendez, but... "Carlos, please. Carlos. But I don't understand why you're telling me this now." He leaned forward, his expression suddenly intense. "Because I heard what Academicos did to you, and I think it's not just wrong. It's foolish. They've forgotten that carnival isn't just spectacle. It's soul. It's history. It's the beating heart of our culture." He paused. "And no one embodies that heart more than you." I felt a lump forming in my throat. "That's kind of you to say." "It's not kindness. It's recognition." He took a sip of his coffee before continuing. "Dona Maria, our theme for this year's parade is Guardians of Tradition, the Keepers of Brazil's Soul. We're honoring the elders who have preserved our cultural heritage in music, in dance, in art, in spiritual traditions." "A worthy theme," I nodded, still not seeing where this was leading. "We want you to be our Grand Marshal, The words hung in the air between us. Grand Marshal. The highest honor a samba school could bestow. The person who leads the entire parade. Who embodies the school's theme and spirit. That's impossible, I said automatically. I've been with Academicos for 60 years, and how have they repaid that loyalty? He asked gently. The question hit me like a physical blow. How indeed? Even so, I said, recovering. No one changes schools after a lifetime, especially not to their greatest rival. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented actions, Carlos replied. Your presence would transform our parade from a performance into a statement about respect, about valuing wisdom, about honoring those who built the traditions we all now profit from. I studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation. I found none. Why would you do this? Imperio doesn't need me to win. No. He agreed. But Brazil needs to see what we value. The world is watching our carnival, Dona Maria. What message do we send if we discard our greatest artists when they reach a certain age? What does that say about who we are becoming? His words resonated with thoughts I'd had myself, but never expected to hear from someone in his position. Still, decades of loyalty couldn't be cast aside so easily. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course. He placed a business card on the table between us. Our first full rehearsal is next Saturday. If you decide to join us, come to our quadra at 7. If not, he smiled slightly. I'll still be your admirer from afar. As he stood to leave, he added one more thing. Whatever you decide, your legacy deserves to be celebrated, not shelved. Remember that. I watched him walk away, the business card burning like a hot coal on the table between us. The proposition was tempting. More than tempting, it was vindicating. But could I really turn my back on 60 years of history? And what would my family say? With these questions swirling in my mind, I gathered my things and headed home. The business card tucked safely in my purse like a secret key to a door I wasn't sure I should open. I didn't tell my family about Carlos Mendez's offer right away. I needed to process it myself first, to understand my own feelings before navigating theirs. So I said nothing at dinner that night, listening instead to Teresa's stories about the hospital where she worked, to Luisa's excited chatter about her upcoming internship interview. My son Eduardo called from São Paulo, where he lived with his wife and children. At 53, he was my oldest, the serious one who had moved away to pursue a career in engineering. He called every Sunday without fail, a ritual that had become even more important after Antonio died. "How are you, Mama?" he asked, his voice crackling slightly over the connection. "I'm fine, Philo," I said automatically. There was a pause. Eduardo had always been perceptive. "You don't sound fine. What's wrong?" I sighed. There was no point hiding it. The news would spread through the samba community soon enough. Academicos has decided I won't be participating in this year's parade. What? Why? They think I'm too old, I said, the words still bitter on my tongue. They offered me an honorary position instead, sitting in the VIP section. Eduardo's outrage came through clearly despite the distance. That's absurd. After everything you've done for them, after all these years, apparently loyalty has an expiration date, I said, trying to keep my tone light. This is unacceptable, Mama. I'm coming to Rio this weekend. We'll go talk to them together. No, Eduardo, I said firmly. This isn't a problem you can fix. Besides, I hesitated, then decided to tell him about the unexpected offer. Something else has happened. I explained about Carlos Mendez's visit, his proposition, the honor of being Grand Marshal for Imperio Tropical. As I spoke, I realized I was warming to the idea, my initial shock giving way to a tentative excitement. Imperio Tropical? Eduardo repeated, sounding stunned. But they're our rivals, yes, for decades. And you're considering it. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me feels it would be a betrayal of everything I've stood for. But another part wants to show academicos exactly what they're throwing away. Eduardo finished for me. I laughed softly. Is that terrible of me? It's human, Mama. And after what they did, completely understandable. He paused. What does the rest of the family think? I haven't told them yet. I wanted to be sure of my own feelings first. And are you sure of your feelings? I considered the question carefully. I know I'm not ready to sit and watch Carnival pass me by. I know I still have something to contribute. And I know I deserve better than what Academicos offered me. Then I think you have your answer, Eduardo said simply. After we hung up, I sat on the small balcony off my bedroom, looking out at the nighttime skyline of Rio. The city twinkled below, vibrant and alive even at this hour. Somewhere out there, both Academicos and Imperio were holding rehearsals, preparing for the greatest spectacle on Earth. For the first time in 60 years, I wasn't part of that preparation. The realization hit me anew, a physical ache in my chest. I took out Carlos's business card, running my fingers over the embossed logo of Imperio Tropical, a stylized palm tree with a crown above it. Grand Marshal, leading the parade not as a dancer among many, but as the honored symbol of the entire school. It was an opportunity I had never imagined would come my way, especially not at 78. The next morning, I gathered my family in our small living room. Teresa, Luisa, my younger son Roberto, who lived nearby with his family, and my sister Claudia, who had been my confidant since childhood. I told them everything. Paolo's dismissal, Carlos's offer, my conversation with Eduardo. I wanted your thoughts before I make a decision. I finished. This affects all of you too. Our family has been academicos, green and white, for generations. There was a moment of silence as they absorbed everything. Then Roberto, always the most temperamental of my children, spoke first. They disrespected you, Mama. They threw away 60 years of loyalty like it was nothing. I say go to Imperio and show them exactly what they lost. It's not that simple, Roberto, Teresa countered. Think of the community backlash. People might see it as betrayal, especially the older members of Academicos, who have been Maman's friends for decades. Friends who didn't stand up for her when it mattered. Roberto shot back. Many of them may not even know yet, Teresa argued. Shouldn't Maman at least talk to them before making such a drastic decision? They looked to me, and I nodded. Teresa has a point. I should speak with some of the old guard first. And if they can't change the committee's decision, Luisa asked, what then? Then I'll have done my due diligence, I said. And I'll be free to make whatever choice feels right. My sister Claudia, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. Maria, we've been through everything together. Good times, hard times, losing Antonio. Her voice softened on my husband's name. Through it all, I've seen you put others first. Your children, your community, your school. Maybe this time the right choice is the one that honors you. Her words settled over the room. Simple but profound. Whatever you decide, we're with you, Roberto said. And the others nodded in agreement, with my family's support bolstering me. I spent the next few days seeking out the elders of Academicos, the veterans who, like me, had been with the school for decades. Some were shocked by the committee's decision, others sadly unsurprised. The samba world was changing, becoming more commercial, more focused on spectacle than tradition. They're doing the same to all of us, little by little, said Seu Jorge, who had been our master drummer for 50 years. Last year they moved me from leading the bateria to consulting. This year, who knows? Have you spoken to Paolo directly? Asked Dona Zeze, my friend of 60 years who had sewn costumes alongside me since we were teenagers. He made the decision very clear, I replied. There's no place for me in the parade. Then perhaps, she said, taking my hands in hers, it's time to go where you are valued. By Friday, I had spoken with a dozen old friends from Academicos. None could change the committee's decision. None blamed me for considering Imperio's offer. Several even seemed quietly pleased at the thought of Paolo's face when he realized what he had set in motion. That night, I took out my most treasured possession, the costume I had worn for Academicos' first championship in 1983. The green and white fabric was faded now, the sequins dulled with age, but it still held the memory of that glorious moment when we had finally reached the pinnacle after years of effort. I held it against my body, looking at my reflection in the bedroom mirror. The woman who had worn this costume was younger, firmer, more agile, but her spirit, my spirit, remained unchanged. The passion for samba, the dedication to our cultural heritage, the joy of performance, all still burned brightly within me. I carefully folded the costume and placed it back in its box. Then I picked up my phone and dialed the number on Carlos Mendez's business card. Señor Mendez, it's Maria Santos. I've made my decision. The Imperio Tropical Quadra, the rehearsal space, was 3 times the size of Academicos, with polished wooden floors and professional lighting. As I approached that Saturday evening, I could hear the bateria warming up, the distinctive rhythm that had been Imperio's signature for decades. Different from Academicos' pattern, but just as compelling, just as authentically samba. I hesitated at the entrance, suddenly overwhelmed by what I was about to do. For 60 years I had worn green and white. Tonight I would don the emerald and gold of our greatest rival. Was I really prepared to cross this line? Before I could reconsider, Carlos Mendez appeared at my side, as if he had been watching for me. Dona Maria, he said warmly. You came. I said I would, I replied, straightening my shoulders. I keep my promises. As do I, he said, offering his arm with old-world courtesy. Shall we? As we entered the quadra, the bustling activity gradually stilled. Hundreds of dancers, musicians, and technicians turned to look at us. At me, I recognized many faces. Rio's samba community was large, but interconnected. These were people I had competed against for decades. People who had seen me lead Academicos to both victory and defeat. What would they think of me now? Carlos led me to the center of the floor and raised his hand for silence, though it was hardly necessary. The quadra was already so quiet, you could hear the ceiling fans whirring overhead. Friends, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. Tonight we are honored by the presence of a true legend of Rio's Carnival. For 60 years, she has embodied the soul of samba, preserving our traditions while pushing the boundaries of our art form. Her choreography has influenced every school in the Sambadrome, including our own. He turned to me, his expression solemn. Dona Maria Santos, Imperio Tropical, invites you to be our Grand Marshal for this year's parade, leading us in our tribute to the guardians of Brazilian cultural traditions. In honoring you, we honor all those who have dedicated their lives to keeping our heritage alive. A murmur ran through the crowd. Surprise, excitement, and yes, a few whispers of controversy. I could see the questions in their eyes. Why had she left Academicos? What did this mean for the competition? Was this a publicity stunt or something more meaningful? Carlos seemed to read the room perfectly. Some of you may wonder why Dona Maria is here tonight. I believe in transparency, so I will tell you. Academicos do Ritmo has decided that after 60 years of service, Dona Maria is too old to participate in their parade. Gasps and exclamations of disbelief echoed through the quadra. Carlos continued, their loss is our immeasurable gain, because we at Imperio understand that true samba has no age limit, that wisdom and experience are not liabilities but precious assets, that in honoring our elders, we honor ourselves and our future. He turned to me again. Dona Maria, will you accept our invitation and lead Imperio Tropical as Grand Marshal in the 2023 Carnival Parade? All eyes were on me now. This was the moment of no return. Once I accepted publicly, there would be no going back to Academicos. No matter what, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. For 60 years I have given my heart to samba. Age has changed my body, but not my passion, not my knowledge, not my commitment to our cultural heritage. I looked around at the faces watching me intently. If Imperio Tropical values these things, if you believe that carnival should represent all ages, all bodies, all aspects of Brazilian identity, then yes, I would be honored to be your Grand Marshal. The quadra erupted in applause and cheers. The bateria spontaneously began to play, and dancers moved forward to embrace me, to welcome me, to express their admiration. It was overwhelming and deeply moving. As the celebration continued around us, Carlos leaned close to be heard above the noise. "There's someone else who wants to welcome you." He gestured toward a small group standing near the entrance. I turned and felt my heart leap. There stood my entire family: Teresa, Roberto, Luisa, my other grandchildren, even Eduardo, who must have flown in from Sao Paulo as promised. And beside them, a dozen of my oldest friends from Academicos, including Seu Jorge and Dona Zezé. "You brought my family?" I asked Carlos, astonished. "They called me," he explained. "They wanted to be here for this moment. As for your friends from Academicos," he smiled slightly. "Let's just say that loyalty to a person sometimes runs deeper than loyalty to an institution." I moved through the crowd toward my family, accepting congratulations and well wishes along the way. When I reached them, Eduardo stepped forward first, enfolding me in a tight embrace. "I'm so proud of you, Mama," he whispered. "This is exactly what they deserve." One by one, my children and grandchildren hugged me, their support unwavering. Then Seu Jorge stepped forward, his weathered face solemn. "You're making the right choice, Maria," he said. "Some of us may follow your example soon. You would leave Academicos too?" I asked, surprised. "If they continue down this path of disrespecting the elders who built the school?" "Yes," he glanced at Carlos, who had followed me across the room, "assuming Imperio would have us. Any friend of Dona Maria's would be welcomed with open arms." Carlos replied without hesitation. Dona Zezé pressed something into my hands, a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "Open it later," she said. "A little something to remember where you came from, even as you embrace where you're going." The rest of that evening passed in a blur of introductions, explanations, and the beginning of planning for my role as Grand Marshal. I met Imperio's Carnavalesco, the artistic director responsible for the overall design of the parade. A young man named Rafael, with innovative ideas but a deep respect for tradition. I was introduced to the choreographers, the costume designers, the float builders. Everyone treated me with a deference that was both flattering and slightly overwhelming. "We want to create something special for you," Rafael explained as he showed me preliminary sketches for my Grand Marshal costume and float. "Something that honors your 60 years in samba while incorporating our school's aesthetic." The designs were breathtaking. A costume in Imperio's emerald green and gold, but with subtle elements of Academicos' traditional patterns woven throughout. Not enough to be obvious, but a knowing nod to my history that those familiar with both schools would recognize. "It's perfect," I said, genuinely moved by the thoughtfulness behind the design. "It acknowledges where I've been while celebrating where I am now." "Exactly," Rafael beamed. "And your float will be the most spectacular opening to a parade that Rio has ever seen." By the time we left the quadra near midnight, I was exhausted but exhilarated. My family accompanied me home, filling the night air with excited chatter about costumes and choreography, and the faces of Academicos members when they heard the news. Only when I was finally alone in my bedroom did I remember Dona Zezé's package. I unwrapped the tissue paper carefully to find a small brooch, a miniature replica of Academicos' symbol, crafted in silver and enamel. It had been given to founding members on the school's 25th anniversary. I had lost mine years ago and had been heartbroken about it. Attached was a note in Zézé's shaky handwriting. Found this in my keepsake box. You should have it. Remember, no matter what colors you wear now, you will always be one of us. With love, Zézé. Tears filled my eyes as I pinned the brooch to my nightgown, close to my heart. It was a reminder that while institutions might fail us, true friendships endured. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone ringing incessantly. When I finally answered, it was Teresa, her voice tense with concern. "Maman, have you seen the news?" "What news?" I asked, still groggy from sleep. "It's everywhere. Social media, the carnival blogs, even the morning shows. Everyone's talking about you joining Imperio." I sat up, suddenly wide awake. "Already? How?" "Someone at the rehearsal must have posted about it. There are videos, Mama, of Carlos announcing you as Grand Marshal, of you accepting. It's gone viral. I didn't know whether to be alarmed or amused. At 78, the concept of going viral was still somewhat foreign to me. "What are people saying?" I asked cautiously. "It's mixed. Some are calling it the greatest carnival coup in decades. Others are..." She hesitated. "Others are calling me a traitor." I finished for her. "Some of the die-hard Academicos fans, yes. But most people seem supportive. The hashtag Respeta a Vovó do Samba is trending." "The what?" "Respect the grandmother of samba," Teresa translated. "It's become a rallying cry against ageism in carnival." Before I could process this information, my phone beeped with another call. Then another. Then text messages began pouring in. Friends, former students, journalists, all wanting to hear my side of the story. "Teresa, I need to call you back," I said, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. "Do you want me to come over? Help you manage this?" "No, querida. I need to think." I ended the call and sat in stunned silence, watching my phone light up with notification after notification. After a few minutes of contemplation, I did something I had never done before. I turned off my phone completely. Then I dressed and walked to the small neighborhood church where I had prayed every Sunday since I was a girl. It was empty at this early hour, peaceful in the morning light filtering through the stained glass windows. I sat in my usual pew and tried to make sense of what was happening. What had begun as a personal decision, a way to continue my participation in the carnival I loved, had somehow become a public statement, a symbol of something larger than myself. Was I ready for that responsibility? To be not just a grand marshal, but a standard-bearer for respect for elders in our culture. To have my personal choice scrutinized and debated across the city, perhaps even the country. As I sat there, an old memory surfaced. Of my mother, who had been a domestic worker all her life, coming home exhausted, but still finding the energy to teach me samba steps in our tiny kitchen. "This is our heritage, Maria," she would say. "When they take everything else from us, they cannot take this. Our music, our dance, our joy. These belong to us." My mother had never paraded in the Sambadrome. She had died before Academicos was even founded. But everything I had accomplished in samba had been built on the foundation she laid, on the passion she instilled in me. What would she think of the controversy swirling around me now? I could almost hear her practical voice. "Does the dance still bring you joy, Maria? Then dance. Let the rest take care of itself." With that thought warming me, I left the church and walked to a nearby cafe where I knew the owner, an old friend who wouldn't pester me with questions. I borrowed his phone to call Luisa, who was the most social media savvy of my family. "Vovo, everyone's looking for you. Are you okay?" She answered immediately. "I'm fine, querida. Just needed some quiet time to think. Can you come meet me at Cafe Minero? Bring your laptop." 20 minutes later, Luisa arrived, slightly breathless, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She hugged me tightly before sitting down. "You've caused quite a stir, Vovo," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "The carnival world is in an uproar, so I hear. Show me what people are saying." Louisa opened her laptop and navigated to various social media sites, carnival blogs and news outlets. The story was indeed everywhere, with headlines ranging from "Samba legend defects" to "Rival school after age discrimination" to "Imperio Tropical scores carnival coup" with Maria Santos as Grand Marshal. There were videos of me dancing from years past, photos of my championship performances with academicos, interviews with samba experts discussing my contribution to carnival culture. And yes, there were angry posts from academicos loyalists, accusing me of betrayal. But they were vastly outnumbered by messages of support. "Look at this," Louisa said, pointing to a post from a famous singer. "She says you've inspired her to speak out about the ageism she's experienced in the music industry. And here, this choreographer says he's going to create a special tribute to you in his next show." I was stunned by the outpouring of support, by how quickly my personal situation had resonated with so many others. "And Academico?" I asked. "Have they responded?" Louisa's expression darkened slightly. "Paolo released a statement this morning. He said they're disappointed by your decision, but wish you well. He claimed they never intended to exclude you completely from the parade, just to give you a less physically demanding role, appropriate for your age." "Damage control," I said, unsurprised. "And too little, too late. Exactly what most people are saying." Louisa agreed. No one's buying it. As we continued scrolling through the reactions, a notification popped up on Louisa's screen. A new statement from Carlos Mendez of Imperio Tropical. "In response to the overwhelming public interest in Dona Maria Santos joining Imperio Tropical as our Grand Marshal, we are holding a press conference tomorrow at 2 p.m. Dona Maria will be present to share her story in her own words. This is not about school rivalry, but about respect for the guardians of our cultural traditions, the theme of our parade this year, and a value we believe should be universal in our carnival community." Louisa looked at me expectantly. "A press conference? Are you ready for that?" I considered the question carefully. Was I ready to step into the spotlight, to publicly explain my decision, to potentially become the face of a larger movement against ageism in carnival? The Maria of yesterday might have hesitated, might have preferred to stay in the background. But today's Maria, the one who had found the courage to leave 60 years of history behind for a new beginning, felt different, stronger, more certain of her worth. "Yes," I said finally. "I'm ready." It's time people heard the truth, not just about what happened to me, but about what's happening to many elders in our community. If my story can make a difference, then I should tell it. Louisa squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride. "You're going to need something spectacular to wear tomorrow." I smiled, thinking of my closet full of carnival costumes from decades past. "I think I know just the thing." The press conference was held in Imperio Tropical's main hall, transformed for the occasion with elegant decorations in the school's colors. A long table had been set up on a small stage, with chairs for Carlos, myself, and several other Imperio officials. Before us, rows of chairs were quickly filling with journalists, photographers, and television crews. I sat in a small anteroom, waiting to make my entrance, dressed in an outfit that had caused quite a stir among my family when I'd revealed it that morning. A vintage dress in Academicos' green and white that I had worn to our 50th anniversary gala, now accessorized with a striking gold and emerald scarf and jewelry in Imperio's colors. A visual representation of my journey from one school to another, honoring both my past and my present. "Are you nervous, Vovo?" Louisa asked, adjusting my scarf slightly. "A little," I admitted. "But mostly I feel purposeful. Like everything in my life has been leading to this moment." There was a knock at the door, and Carlos entered, elegant in a suit with an emerald green tie. He paused when he saw my outfit, then smiled appreciatively. "Perfect," he said. "Respectful of your history, while embracing your future. The photographers will love it. That wasn't why I chose it," I said. "But I'm glad you approve. The hall is full," he informed us. "Not just press. Members of other samba schools have come too. Word has spread." "Other schools?" I asked, surprised. "Why would they care about one old woman changing allegiances?" Carlos exchanged a glance with Luisa. "Because you're not just any old woman, Dona Maria. You're a symbol now. Of respect for tradition, of refusing to be sidelined because of age." He offered me his arm. "Are you ready to face them?" I took a deep breath and stood, taking his arm, as ready as I'll ever be. The murmur of conversation in the hall died away as we entered and made our way to the stage. I kept my head high, my back straight, channeling the same dignity I had taught my samba students to embody during the parade. From the corner of my eye, I could see cameras flashing, capturing every step. As I took my seat at the center of the table, I scanned the audience. In the front row sat my family, Teresa, Roberto, Eduardo, and several of my grandchildren. Behind them, I recognized faces from various samba schools across Rio, including, to my surprise, several veteran members of Academicos. Carlos began with a formal welcome and a brief statement about Imperio's decision to invite me to be their Grand Marshal. He spoke eloquently about the importance of honoring tradition while embracing innovation, about the role of elders in preserving cultural heritage. Then it was my turn. I moved to the microphone, looking out at the sea of expectant faces. For a moment, stage fright threatened to overwhelm me. Then I spotted Dona Zeze in the third row, giving me an encouraging nod, and my nerves steadied. "Good afternoon," I began. "My name is Maria Santos. I am 78 years old. For 60 of those years, I danced with Academicos do Ritmo, the school I helped found when I was 18. I have been a dancer, a choreographer, a costume designer, a teacher, and a mentor to generations of samba performers." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the room. 3 days ago, I was told that I am too old to participate in this year's carnival parade with Academicos, that my body is no longer capable of meeting their standards, that I should accept an honorary position, sitting and watching while others dance. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the audience. I continued, my voice growing stronger. "I have never sat during carnival. Not when I was 9 months pregnant with twins. Not when I had pneumonia. Not the year after my beloved husband died. Samba is not just a performance for me. It is my life's blood, my connection to my ancestors, my gift to future generations." I gestured to Carlos beside me. "When Imperio Tropical offered me the position of Grand Marshal, they weren't just offering me a role in their parade. They were affirming that experience has value, that tradition deserves respect, that age brings wisdom worth celebrating, not hiding away." I leaned slightly toward the microphone, my voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "This is not just about me. Across our carnival community, elders are being sidelined, their knowledge ignored, their contributions forgotten. In the rush for spectacle and commercial success, we are losing something precious in this process. The living connection to our cultural roots." The room had grown completely silent, every eye fixed on me. I straightened my shoulders, my voice ringing out clearly for the final part of my statement. "By accepting Imperio's invitation, I am not just securing my own place in this year's parade. I am standing for every elder whose voice has been silenced, whose knowledge has been dismissed, whose body has been deemed inadequate, despite the soul that animates it. I am declaring that samba belongs to all of us, young and old, past and present, tradition and innovation together." I sat back, slightly breathless from the emotion of the moment. The silence held for a heartbeat, then two, Before the room erupted in applause, people rose to their feet, cameras flashed, and I saw tears on more than a few faces. Carlos leaned over to whisper, "Magnificent. You've touched a nerve that needed touching." When the applause finally died down, Carlos opened the floor for questions. Journalists called out from every direction, and Carlos pointed to them, one by one. "Dona Maria, do you consider your move to Imperio an act of revenge against academicos?" asked a reporter from a major newspaper. I shook my head firmly. "Not revenge, self-respect. There's a difference." "Will you be actually dancing in the parade or just riding on a float?" Another called out. "Both," I replied with a smile. "I may not move exactly as I did at 20, but I can still samba with the best of them." "What do you say to those who call you a traitor to academicos?" asked a young man near the back. The question stung, but I had anticipated it. "I say that loyalty should be reciprocal. I gave academicos 60 years of my life. They gave me 3 minutes to accept being sidelined." The questions continued for nearly an hour, about my history with academicos, my expectations for parading with Imperio, my thoughts on the changing nature of Carnival. I answered each one honestly, without bitterness, but without sugarcoating the reality of what had happened. Finally, a young woman from a cultural magazine asked the question that would prove most consequential. "Dona Maria, you mentioned that your situation reflects a broader problem of elders being sidelined in Carnival. Do you think there should be formal protections or guidelines to prevent age discrimination in samba schools?" I considered the question carefully before answering. I believe each school must find its own balance between innovation and tradition, between showcasing young talent and honoring experienced performers. But yes, I think the Carnival community as a whole needs to have a serious conversation about how we value our elders. Perhaps what happened to me can be the beginning of that conversation. As the press conference concluded, Carlos announced that Imperio would be hosting a special event the following month, a showcase of veteran samba performers from across Rio, celebrating their contributions and demonstrating that age was no barrier to artistic excellence. "And Dona Maria will be our guest of honor," he added, "as we launch what we hope will become an annual tradition of honoring the guardians of samba." The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause, and as we left the stage, I was surrounded by well-wishers. Among them were several of the veteran Academicos members, including "You've started something important, Maria," he said, embracing me warmly. "Something bigger than just your role in this year's parade." "I never intended to become a cause," I admitted. "The best causes choose their champions, not the other way around," he replied with a wink. As my family gathered around me, shielding me from the press still clamoring for additional comments, I felt a curious mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. In just a few days, my life had transformed completely. From the quiet routine I had maintained since Antonio's death, to the center of a public conversation about age, respect, and the soul of Carnival. "Are you okay, Mama?" Teresa asked, noting my thoughtful expression as we made our way to the car, waiting to take us home. "I'm more than okay," I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. For the first time in a long time, I feel completely alive. The 3 months between the press conference and Carnival were the busiest of my life since my early days with Academicos. My role as Grand Marshal involved far more than simply leading the parade. I became deeply involved in Imperio's preparations, from costume design to choreography, to the construction of the massive floats that would carry our theme through the Sambadrome. Rafael, the Carnavalesco, sought my input on every aspect of the Guardians of Tradition theme, incorporating my knowledge of samba history and cultural context into the parade's narrative flow. The young choreographers listened attentively to my suggestions about movements that would honor traditional samba while creating a visually spectacular performance. Even the bateria master, a proud man with 30 years of experience, asked me to share insights from my decades with academicos. Your perspective is invaluable. Carlos told me during one particularly intense planning session, you see connections and possibilities that the younger team members miss. But my involvement with Imperio was only part of my suddenly busy schedule. The press conference had indeed sparked a broader conversation about the role of elders in Carnival, and I found myself invited to speak at cultural centers, universities, and even a congressional hearing on cultural heritage preservation. You've become the face of a movement, Vovo, Louisa observed one evening, as she helped me organize my calendar, now filled with appointments and interviews. At 78, I laughed. Who would have thought? The special showcase of veteran samba performers that Carlos had announced grew into a major event, with participants from every major school in Rio. Even some academicos veterans participated. Though the school's official position remained cool and distant, Paulo released a carefully worded statement wishing the event success, but declined to attend, citing prior commitments. The showcase was held at the Municipal Theater, Rio's most prestigious venue, and sold out within hours of tickets becoming available. On the night of the performance, I stood backstage, watching as dancers in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s prepared to show that samba truly had no age limit. Nervous? Asked Seu Jorge, who had left Academicos to join Imperio shortly after my departure, bringing several other veterans with him. Not about the dancing, I replied, but about what this represents. Yes, it feels like a turning point. It is. He agreed. Look around you. I did, seeing the mixture of veteran performers and young assistants working together. The energy and wisdom flowing in both directions. This was how it should be. Experience and innovation in partnership, not competition. The showcase was a triumph. Each performance demonstrated that, while age might change the body, it didn't diminish the soul of the dance. When my turn came, I performed a solo piece that incorporated elements from each decade of my career. A living history of samba evolution. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. But the most moving moment came at the finale, when all the performers returned to the stage together, joined by young dancers from their respective schools. As the generations danced side by side, the message was unmistakable. This was how Carnival culture stayed alive. Through transmission from old to young, through respect for tradition alongside embrace of innovation. Afterward, at the reception, I was approached by a distinguished older man I recognized as the president of the League of Samba Schools, the organization that oversaw the official carnival competition. Dona Maria, he said, taking my hands in his, you have given us much to think about. The League will be convening a special committee to develop guidelines for the inclusion and recognition of veteran performers in our schools. We would be honored if you would serve as an advisor. It was the first official acknowledgement that my individual situation had indeed sparked a broader reassessment. I accepted immediately, seeing it as an opportunity to ensure that what had happened to me wouldn't become a pattern across other schools. As Carnival approached, media interest in my story intensified. International journalists came to interview the 78-year-old samba queen who defied ageism, as one British newspaper dubbed me. A French documentary team followed me through rehearsals, capturing the preparations for my debut as Imperio's Grand Marshal. Through it all, I tried to maintain focus on what mattered most. The dance itself, the joy of samba, the honor of representing not just Imperio, but all the elders who had preserved our traditions through decades of dedication. The night before the parade, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my small balcony, looking out at the city lights, thinking of all the carnival eves I had experienced in my life. The nervous anticipation was familiar, but this time it was amplified by the knowledge that Tomorrow would be unlike any parade in my 60 years of carnival. A soft knock at my bedroom door interrupted my thoughts. It was Teresa, carrying 2 cups of chamomile tea. "I thought you might be awake," she said, joining me on the balcony. "Pre-carnival jitters, something like that," I admitted, accepting the tea gratefully. "Everything has happened so fast. Sometimes I wonder if I'm dreaming," Teresa smiled. "If you are, then we're all sharing the same dream. I've never seen you so energized, Mama. It's like you've been reborn these past months. I feel reborn," I said, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. "After your father died, I was just going through the motions, teaching my classes, attending rehearsals, doing what was expected of me. But now," I gestured vaguely toward the city spread out below us, "now I have purpose again. Something that matters beyond just myself." "You've changed things," Teresa said. "Not just for yourself, but for others too. That's a powerful legacy." We sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping our tea, until Teresa asked the question I had been avoiding in my own thoughts. "Are you sad about not wearing academicos green and white tomorrow? After 60 years, it must feel strange to parade in different colors." I considered her question carefully. "There's a part of me that will always belong to academicos," I said finally. The school was my home for most of my life. But homes can become prisons when they no longer allow you to grow, to be fully yourself. I touched the small academicos pin that Dona Zeze had given me, which I had attached to the inside of my costume where it would rest against my heart. I'll carry the best of those years with me tomorrow. But I'll be looking forward, not back. Teresa nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Get some sleep, Mama. Tomorrow you make history." But sleep continued to elude me after Teresa left. Instead, memories flooded my mind of my first carnival at 18, terrified and exhilarated, of dancing with Antonio in the year we won our first championship, of carrying baby Eduardo in a sling as I taught choreography, of the countless hours of preparation, the joy of performance, the community we had built around the rhythm of the drums. Academicos had been more than a samba school to me. It had been the framework of my life, the extended family that had celebrated my triumphs and supported me through my losses. Leaving had been necessary, but that didn't mean it wasn't painful. "Am I doing the right thing, Antonio?" I whispered to the night air, imagining my husband beside me as he had been for so many carnival eves. A warm breeze suddenly swept across the balcony, carrying with it the distant sound of drums from some late-night rehearsal. I closed my eyes, letting the rhythm wash over me. And in that moment, I felt Antonio's presence as clearly as if he had spoken aloud. "Dance, Maria. Dance with all your heart, as you always have." With that blessing warming me, I finally went to bed, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. Carnival Day dawned clear and hot, the February sun already intense by early morning. I was awake before dawn, my body humming with anticipation. Today, Imperio Tropical would be the 7th school to parade, entering the Sambadrome just as the sun was setting. The golden hour, considered by many to be the most prestigious time slot. My family arrived mid-morning to accompany me to Imperio's concentration area, the staging zone where schools gathered before their parade. The atmosphere in our small house was festive and emotional, with everyone talking at once, offering encouragement, fussing over details. "The costume delivery just arrived," Luisa announced, carrying in a large box emblazoned with Imperio's logo. "Should we open it now?" I nodded, suddenly nervous. I had seen the designs, had attended fittings, but the final version had been kept as a surprise. Until today. Luisa opened the box carefully, peeling back layers of tissue paper to reveal a creation that took my breath away. The base was a classic samba costume in Imperio's emerald green, but overlaid with intricate gold embroidery depicting scenes from carnival history, including subtle references to my years with Academico. The headdress was a golden crown, interwoven with green feathers. Lighter than it looked, but still majestic. It's magnificent, Teresa breathed, touching the fabric reverently. It's you, Vovo, Louisa said simply. Your whole life in one costume, as my granddaughters helped me dress, applying the elaborate makeup that was part of carnival tradition. I felt a sense of ceremonial transformation. I was no longer just Maria Santos, widow and grandmother. I was becoming the Grand Marshal, the embodiment of Imperio's theme, the symbol of respect for tradition that would lead hundreds of performers through the Sambadrome. When I was fully dressed, my family stepped back to look at me. Their expressions, awe, pride, love, told me everything I needed to know before I even looked in the mirror. Mamai, Eduardo said, his voice thick with emotion. You are magnificent. I turned to the full-length mirror and barely recognized myself. The costume was regal without being costumey, elegant while still unmistakably carnival. The makeup accentuated my features without trying to make me look younger. My age was visible, honored even, in the overall effect. This is how a Grand Marshal should look, I said, turning to see the costume from all angles. They've captured exactly the right balance. A car sent by Imperio arrived to take us to the concentration area, where the final preparations would take place. As we drove through the streets of Rio, people recognized me through the windows, pointing and waving. Some even ran alongside the car for a few steps, calling out encouragement. You're a celebrity, Vovo, one of my younger grandchildren said, impressed by the attention. No, querido, I corrected gently. I'm a symbol. There's a difference. The concentration area behind the Sambadrome was organized chaos. Thousands of performers in various stages of preparation. Technicians making last-minute adjustments to floats. Directors shouting instructions through megaphones. The air vibrated with anticipation, with the overlapping rhythms of different baterias warming up, with the collective energy of people preparing to give everything they had to the performance of a lifetime. As our car pulled into Imperio's designated section, I saw that a special area had been prepared for my arrival. A small tent with comfortable seating, refreshments, and a team of assistants ready to ensure I had everything I needed before the parade. We want to make sure you're not exhausted before we even begin, Carlos explained as he greeted me. The parade is long, and your float comes early in the sequence. I was touched by the consideration, but waved off the special treatment. I've been preparing for this day for 60 years, I told him. A little pre-parade excitement won't hurt me. Still, I accepted a chair in the shade and watched as the final preparations unfolded around me. My family stayed close, forming a protective buffer between me and the well-wishers, who continually approached to take photos or offer encouragement. As the afternoon progressed, I noticed a commotion at the edge of Imperio's area. Carlos went to investigate and returned looking both concerned and amused. It seems we have some unexpected visitors, he said. A delegation from Académicos do Ritmo is asking to speak with you. My heart skipped a beat. Paulo? No, not the current leadership. The old guard, Dona Zezé, Sir Joaquim, about a dozen others. They're wearing Académicos colors, but say they've come to wish you well. I stood immediately. Bring them here. Carlos hesitated. Are you sure? Today is emotional enough without... They're my oldest friends, I interrupted. Of course I want to see them. Minutes later, the small group was escorted into our area. Dona Zezé led them, resplendent in Académicos green and white despite her 82 years. When she saw me in my Imperio costume, she stopped short, her eyes filling with tears. Oh, Maria, she said. You look like a queen. I moved forward to embrace her, careful of both our costumes. What are you doing here, Zezé? You should be with your school. We are with our school, she replied firmly. The real school, the one built on respect and tradition, not the corporate shell it's becoming. The others nodded in agreement. They were all veterans like me, most in their 70s or 80s, all wearing Academico's colors, but with small gold pins, Imperio's symbol, attached to their costumes. "We came to stand with you," so Joaquim explained, "to show that Academicos' true heart is with you today, even if its current leadership is not." I was deeply moved by their gesture, which I knew could cause problems for them within their school. "Won't you face consequences for this?" Dona Zezé laughed, the sound bright and defiant. "What will they do? Tell us we're too old to participate? They already did that. Half of us have been honored with VIP seating this year." She practically spat the word "honored" besides, added Sir Joaquim. "After your parade tonight, things will change. The League's new guidelines will see to that." I looked at my old friends, the people who had shared my journey through 6 decades of Carnival, and felt a surge of love and gratitude. They had chosen to stand with me, to publicly align themselves with the principle I was representing, rather than the school that had been our shared home for so long. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing they understood all that those 2 words contained. We embraced, took photos together, and shared memories of Carnival's past, until it was time for them to return to Academicos' area. As they left, Dona Zezé pressed something into my hand. A small green and white ribbon. "For luck," she whispered. "From all of us who wish we were parading with you tonight." I tucked the ribbon into my costume alongside the pin she had given me earlier. Another piece of my history to carry with me into this new chapter. As sunset approached, the energy in the concentration area intensified. The batteria began its final warm-up, the sound of hundreds of drums creating a physical vibration that resonated in my chest. Dancers stretched and checked each other's costumes. Float technicians made final adjustments to the mechanical elements that would animate the massive structures. Carlos approached with Rafael, the Carnivalesco, both looking slightly nervous. "It's time to board your float, Dona Maria. Are you ready?" I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar pre-parade butterflies in my stomach. The same feeling I'd had before my very first carnival, 60 years earlier. "I'm ready." My family gathered around for final hugs and well wishes before they departed for their seats in the Sambadrome. Eduardo, who rarely showed strong emotion, held me longer than the others. "Show them what they lost, Mamai," he whispered. "Show everyone what 78 years of samba wisdom looks like." With my family's love bolstering me, I followed Carlos and Rafael to the first float in Imperio's parade. A spectacular creation designed to look like a golden throne elevated above a garden of green foliage. Assistants helped me climb the stairs built into the back of the float, leading to the elevated platform where I would stand throughout the parade. "The mechanics are simple," Rafael explained, showing me the safety harness that would secure me while allowing freedom of movement. The throne rotates slowly, giving the audience a full view from all sides. If you feel tired at any point, there's a concealed seat you can use without anyone noticing. I nodded, taking in the technical details while my mind raced ahead to the moment we would enter the Sambadrome. The moment when thousands of spectators, millions of television viewers, and yes, the members of Academicos do Ritmo, would see me in my new role. 10 minutes to procession, called a director through a megaphone. Around us, the final preparations accelerated. Last touches to costumes, final instructions to dances, the batteria forming into its precise configuration. Carlos squeezed my hand before descending from the float. "This is your moment, Dona Maria. Everything we've worked for these past months comes down to the next 80 minutes. As he left, I took my position on the throne, adjusting my costume and headdress one final time. From this elevated vantage point, I could see the entire school assembled in formation. Over 3,000 participants organized into wings, each representing an aspect of our theme. The front commission, the dancers who would enter the Sambadrome first, wore costumes representing the oldest samba traditions. Behind them, sections devoted to various cultural guardians, the griots of African traditions, the indigenous knowledge keepers, the masters of capoeira, the priestesses of candomblé, and leading them all Me, Maria Santos, 78 years old, embodying the spirit of respect for tradition. That was our theme and our message. 5 minutes! Came the call. I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself in this moment. I thought of my mother teaching me to samba in our tiny kitchen, of Antonio, my partner in dance and in life, of all the carnivals that had come before, each unique, each a celebration of life and culture and community. Imperio Tropical! Prepare to move! The batteria's rhythm intensified, the massive drums creating a wall of sound that seemed to physically push us forward. The float's engine hummed to life beneath me, and I felt the slight jerk as it began to move. We proceeded slowly through the concentration area toward the entrance to the Sambadrome, the massive stadium built specifically for carnival parades, with seating for 90,000 spectators and standing room for thousands more. As we approached the entrance, I could hear the roar of the crowd, feel the electric anticipation in the air. Imperio Tropical, you have clearance to enter. Begin your procession. The front commission burst into the Sambadrome, their green and gold costumes catching the last rays of the setting sun. The crowd's roar intensified as they recognized the beginning of our school's presentation. The announcers' voices boomed over the loudspeakers, introducing our theme, our carnavalesco, our president, and then leading Imperio Tropical this year in an unprecedented honor, Grand Marshal Maria Santos, the legendary dancer and choreographer bringing 60 years of samba wisdom to our parade. My float moved forward, crossing the threshold into the Sambadrome, and the world exploded into sound and color and movement. The stadium stretched before me, a canyon of humanity, every seat filled, every standing area packed with spectators. Cameras flashed like stars, television crews tracked our progress, and the crowd. The crowd was on its feet, a wave of sound washing over me as they recognized who I was, what my presence represented. Dona Maria, Dona Maria. The chant began in one section and spread rapidly until it seemed the entire Sambadrome was calling my name. In that moment, all the preparation, all the controversy, all the politics fell away. There was only the music, the movement, the magic of carnival that had captivated me since childhood. I raised my arms in the traditional samba pose and began to dance on my elevated platform, my body responding to the rhythm as it always had, finding the perfect synchronicity between music and movement that is the heart of samba. The float moved steadily down the runway, rotating slowly to give all sides of the audience a view. Below and behind me, hundreds of dancers moved in perfect unison, their choreography telling the story of tradition's guardians through the language of dance. The massive floats that followed mine depicted scenes of cultural transmission, elders teaching young people, wisdom passing from generation to generation. As we approached the first judging station, I caught sight of my family in their reserved seats. Teresa, Roberto, Eduardo, Luisa, all my grandchildren, even some cousins who had traveled from other states to witness this moment. They were on their feet, cheering and waving, their faces shining with pride. And not far from them, in another section, I spotted the veterans from Académicos who had visited me earlier. Dona Zeze, Sir Joaquim, and the others, they too were standing, some openly weeping, all radiating support across the distance that separated us. The parade route through the Sambadrome is approximately 700 meters long, and schools are given 75-90 minutes to complete their presentation. Every second is choreographed, every movement planned for maximum impact on the judges and the audience. As Grand Marshal, my role was to set the tone, to embody our theme, to be the living symbol of what Imperio Tropical was celebrating. As we passed the halfway point, I felt a surge of energy rather than fatigue. The connection with the crowd, the music, the collective purpose of thousands of performers working in harmony. It was intoxicating, rejuvenating. I had never felt more alive, more present, more certain of my place in the world. And then I saw them, the Academicos do Ritmo delegation, seated in their official box. Paolo was there, along with the other directors who had decided I was too old to participate in their parade. Their expressions as they watched me lead their rival school were a mixture of shock, dismay, and, I thought, perhaps a dawning recognition of their mistake. I didn't gloat. I didn't even change my expression. I simply danced with all the grace and dignity I possessed, my eyes meeting Paolo's for just a moment before moving on. That brief connection said everything that needed to be said. You were wrong about me. You underestimated what age and experience bring to Carnival. You forgot that samba lives in the soul, not just the body. As our parade neared its conclusion, the batteria performed its most complex rhythm. The dancers executed their most spectacular choreography, and my float moved into its final position. The crowd's response was deafening. Applause, cheers, and that chant again. Dona Maria! Dona Maria! In the judges' section, I could see them on their feet, a rare break from their usual professional reserve. Even they had been caught up in the emotion of the moment, in the power of what we had created together. As the last of our school exited the samba-drome, disappearing into the dispersal area where floats and costumes would be dismantled, I felt a curious mixture of exhilaration and peace. Whatever happened next, whether Imperio won the championship or not, whether the conversation about elders in Carnival continued or faded, I had done what I set out to do. I had danced with all my heart, as I always had. I had honored my traditions while embracing change. I had shown that 78 years was not an ending, but another stage in a continuing journey. As assistants helped me down from the float, my legs shaky after standing for nearly 2 hours, Carlos rushed forward to embrace me, heedless of our elaborate costumes. "Magnificent!" he exclaimed. "The judges were mesmerized. The crowd was yours from the first moment. You've given us more than a performance. You've given us a moment in Carnival history that will never be forgotten." All around us, Imperio's members were celebrating, hugging each other, some crying with the emotional release that follows such an intense performance. Many came to embrace me, to thank me, to share what the experience had meant to them. My grandmother was watching from home, one young dancer told me, tears streaming down her face. She used to dance with Portela in the 1960s, but hasn't been able to participate for years. She called me right after our parade ended to say you've given her hope that she might return next year. Stories like this one poured in as we made our way through the dispersal area, changing out of our costumes, removing makeup, transforming back into our everyday selves. But something had changed, something fundamental in how these young performers saw their elders, in how they understood the continuity of their art form. My family was waiting for me outside, along with journalists and photographers still hungry for images and quotes. I was exhausted, but fulfilled in a way I hadn't experienced in years. "Vovo, you were incredible," Luisa exclaimed, hugging me carefully, mindful of my fatigue. "Everyone is saying Imperio has the championship locked up. The parade isn't about winning," I reminded her, though I couldn't help but feel a flutter of competitive spirit. After 60 years, the desire for the championship never quite fades. "But it would be sweet justice if you did win," Roberto said with a grin. "Especially after..." He stopped abruptly, looking over my shoulder with an expression of surprise. I turned to see Paolo making his way toward us, separated from his usual entourage, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. My family tensed protectively around me, but I gestured for them to give us space. Whatever Paolo had come to say, I was ready to hear it. "Dona Maria," he began formally, stopping a respectful distance away. "Your performance tonight was extraordinary." "Thank you, Paolo," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He seemed to struggle with his next words. may have been hasty in our decision regarding your participation with Academicos this year. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was as close as his pride would allow him to come in this public setting. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But what's done is done. We all must live with our choices. He nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. The League's new guidelines on veteran performers. They will change how all schools approach this issue in the future. Your courage in speaking out has ensured that. It wasn't courage, Paolo. It was necessity. Some things are too important to accept in silence. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw in his eyes a new understanding. Perhaps of me, perhaps of himself, perhaps of the complex interplay between tradition and innovation that defines Carnival. Academicos' door is always open to you, Dona Maria, he said finally. Should you ever wish to return? I smiled, genuinely touched by the gesture despite everything that had happened. Thank you, Paolo. But for now, my path lies with Imperio. They saw my value when others didn't. Loyalty works both ways. He nodded again, accepting this reality, then turned and walked away, back to his school, his responsibilities, perhaps to a new perspective on what Carnival could be, when it embraced all ages, all bodies, all expressions of the samba spirit. As we made our way home through the carnival-filled streets of Rio, I felt a profound sense of completion, not an ending. I had many more carnivals ahead of me. I was certain, but the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. Are you happy, Mama? Teresa asked softly as we drove through the night, the sounds of celebration echoing around us. I looked out at the city I loved, at the family that had supported me through this unexpected journey, and thought of all that had happened since that day in Paolo's office, when he had told me I was too old to dance. Yes, I said simply. I am very happy. And in that moment, it was the absolute truth. At 78, I had found a new beginning, a new purpose, a new way to honor the traditions that had shaped my life, while helping to ensure they would continue to shape the lives of generations to come. Samba, after all, has no age limit. It lives in the soul, not the birth certificate. And my soul was dancing. The results of the carnival competition wouldn't be announced until Ash Wednesday, following the traditional deliberation by the judges. In the meantime, Rio continued its celebration, with blocos, street parties, filling every neighborhood with music and dancing. The day after our parade, I slept until noon, my body finally succumbing to the exhaustion of months of preparation and the intense performance itself. When I finally emerged from my bedroom, I found my house filled with flowers, bouquets and arrangements from well-wishers, admirers, journalists, and even some anonymous donors who had been touched by my story. The delivery people have been coming non-stop since 8 this morning, Teresa informed me, clearing space on the dining table for yet another arrangement. And the phone hasn't stopped ringing. Any word from Imperio? I asked, accepting the cup of coffee she handed me. Carlos called twice. He says the initial feedback from the judges is extremely positive, whatever that means. And he wants you to join them for the official viewing party tomorrow, when the results are announced. I nodded, sipping my coffee thoughtfully. The competition results mattered, of course. They always did. But somehow, they seemed less important than they once had. What we had accomplished went beyond scores and rankings. We had made a statement about respect, about the value of experience, about the true spirit of Carnival that transcended the commercial spectacle it had increasingly become. There's something else, Teresa said, her expression turning serious. A lawyer called from the Cultural Heritage Ministry. They want to interview you for their oral history project on Carnival traditions. They're creating an archive, and they want you to be one of the first contributors. I was genuinely surprised. The government's interest in preserving Carnival traditions had waxed and waned over the years, often depending on which political party was in power. That they were reaching out now suggested that the conversation about cultural heritage and the role of elders had reached beyond the samba community. "I'd be honored," I said. "Our stories should be preserved, not just for historical interest, but as resources for future generations." Teresa smiled. "That's exactly what the lawyer said you'd say. She seemed to know you already. What's her name?" "Dr. Camila Rodriguez." The name triggered a distant memory. Camila. There was a little girl in my children's samba class about 20 years ago. Serious, always asking questions about the history behind the steps. Could it be the same person? Teresa laughed. "In Rio? Probably. Everyone is connected somehow." The rest of the day passed in a pleasant haze of visitors, phone calls, and quiet moments of reflection. Eduardo and his family had extended their stay in Rio to attend the results viewing party. Roberto brought his children over for dinner. Luisa came and went, managing the increasing media requests and helping me sort through the mountain of messages that had accumulated. That evening, as we sat together in the living room, watching the television coverage of the day's carnival events, a special segment began about our parade. The commentators were effusive in their praise, particularly of the powerful statement made by Grand Marshal Maria Santos. They showed clips of my performance, interspersed with interviews with cultural experts discussing the significance of having a 78-year-old woman leading one of Rio's major schools. One historian placed it in the context of Brazil's aging population and the need to reconsider how society values its elders. A samba master from another school spoke about the technical precision of my dancing, noting that age has refined her movements, distilling them to their purest essence. But the most moving moment came when they showed reactions from ordinary people who had watched the parade. A teenage girl saying I had changed how she thought about her own grandmother. An elderly man in tears because, finally, someone showed that we still have value. A middle-aged woman who had brought her mother to the Sambadrome, specifically to see me because she needed to know that life doesn't end at 60 or 70 or 80. "You've touched so many people, Vovo," Luisa said softly as the segment ended. "Far beyond what any of us imagined." I nodded, too moved to speak immediately. When I had agreed to become Imperio's Grand Marshal, I had been thinking primarily of my own desire to continue participating in Carnival, of showing Academicos what they had lost. I hadn't fully grasped how my personal situation would resonate with so many others, how it would tap into deeper currents of concern about aging, respect, and cultural continuity. "With influence comes responsibility," I said finally. "If people are looking to me as some kind of symbol, then I need to be thoughtful about what I represent and how I use this unexpected platform." "Always the teacher," Eduardo said with affectionate teasing. "Even your own moment of triumph becomes a lesson for others." I smiled, acknowledging the truth in his observation. Teaching is in my blood. Just like samba, the next day, Ash Wednesday, the official end of Carnival, and the day when competition results would be announced, dawned clear and hot. By tradition, this was a day of rest after the excesses of Carnival, when the city began its symbolic period of reflection, leading to Easter. But for the samba schools, it was a day of nervous anticipation, of analyzing every aspect of their performances, of preparing for either celebration or disappointment. Imperio had arranged for a viewing party at their quadra, where members would gather to watch the televised announcement of the results. As a courtesy, they had extended invitations to my entire family. Recognizing that my journey had involved all of them, we arrived at the quadra in the late afternoon to find it transformed from a rehearsal space into a festive hall, with large screens set up to show the broadcast, tables laden with food and drink, and hundreds of members already gathered, still riding the emotional high of their performance. Carlos met us at the entrance, embracing me warmly. "Dona Maria, the woman of the hour, one of many who contributed to our parade," I corrected gently. "A carnival is never the work of one person." True, but some contributions shine brighter than others, he replied. Come, we've saved seats for you and your family in the front. As we made our way through the crowd, I was stopped repeatedly by members wanting to express their gratitude, to share what the experience had meant to them, to ask if I would return next year. To this last question, I gave no definitive answer. It was too soon to think about next year when this year's journey was still unfolding. The atmosphere in the quadra was electric with anticipation. Imperio had placed fourth in the previous year's competition. Respectable, but not enough to secure the coveted championship. This year, the buzz among carnival experts suggested we had a real chance at the title. As the time for the announcement approached, the room grew quieter, tension building. The television broadcast began with a recap of all the school's performances, showing highlights from each parade. When they came to Imperio, the footage focused heavily on my entrance as Grand Marshal, on the crowd's reaction, on the perfect integration of our theme throughout every aspect of the presentation. The technical execution was flawless, one commentator noted. But what set Imperio apart this year was the emotional impact, the authenticity of their message about honoring tradition. Having Maria Santos as Grand Marshal wasn't just a symbolic choice. It was the embodiment of their theme in human form. Finally, the moment arrived. The president of the League of Samba Schools appeared on screen, ready to announce the results in reverse order, from 10th place to 1st. In 10th place, with 268.4 points, the room held its collective breath as each school was named, the tension mounting with each announcement. When only 3 schools remained unmentioned, Imperio, Académicos, and Portela, another traditional powerhouse, the quadra was so quiet, you could hear the ice melting in drinks. In 3rd place, with 299.1 points, Académicos do Ritmo. A murmur ran through the crowd, a mixture of satisfaction that we had placed higher than my former school, and increasing hope that we might actually win. On screen, the cameras showed the Académicos' reaction. Disappointment, but not surprise. They had known their parade hadn't been their strongest. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the moment we've all been waiting for. The champion of the 2023 Rio Carnival, with a near-perfect score of 299.8 points is... The pause seemed to stretch for an eternity. Imperio Tropical! The quadra exploded. People leaped to their feet, screaming, hugging, some collapsing in tears of joy. Confetti cannons fired, bathing us all in a shower of green and gold. The batteria positioned at the back of the room spontaneously began to play their victory rhythm. Carlos lifted me from my seat in an exuberant embrace, spinning me around as if I weighed nothing. We did it! We did it! And it's because of you, Dona Maria. It's because of all of us, I insisted. Though I couldn't help but feel a surge of vindication. We had won. The school that had valued me, that had seen worth in my age and experience rather than limitation, had claimed the championship. The celebration continued for hours, with champagne flowing, impromptu samba circles forming throughout the quadra, and a constant stream of members coming to thank me, to share in the moment, to bask in our collective achievement. Late in the evening, as the party showed no signs of slowing, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The night air was warm, carrying the scents of the city, salt from the ocean, cooking spices from nearby restaurants, the indefinable essence of Rio itself. I thought of all the carnivals of my life, the victories, the defeats, the years when the competition seemed like the most important thing in the world. And I realized that while winning was sweet, especially under these circumstances, it wasn't the trophy or the title that mattered most. What mattered was the journey, the communities we built around our shared passion, the traditions we preserved and evolved, the bridges we created between generations, the moments of transcendent joy when music and movement and collective purpose aligned perfectly. A soft voice interrupted my thoughts. "Congratulations, Dona Maria." I turned to see Dr. Camila Rodriguez. Indeed, the same serious little girl from my children's class, now a poised professional woman in her 30s. "Camila," I said warmly. "Teresa told me you called. I'm glad to see you again after all these years. I never forgot your classes," she said. "You taught me that samba wasn't just steps and rhythm. It was history, identity, resistance, joy. It shaped my decision to specialize in cultural heritage law. We talked for a while about the Oral History Project, about the importance of documenting the experiences of Carnival's elders before they were lost. As we spoke, I felt the pieces of my future beginning to take shape. Not just as a performer, but as a keeper and transmitter of knowledge, as a bridge between past and present. "Would you be willing to serve as the project's first subject?" Camila asked. "Your story, especially after what's happened these past months, could inspire others to share theirs." "I would be honored," I replied. "On one condition." "What's that?" "That we include others as well. Not just the famous names or the championship winners, but the costume makers, the composers, the behind-the-scenes workers who have kept Carnival alive for decades without recognition." Camila smiled. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. This isn't about creating a few Carnival celebrities. It's about preserving the collective wisdom of a cultural tradition." As she left, promising to be in touch soon to begin the formal interviews, I felt a sense of purpose extending beyond the Carnival season, beyond the competition, beyond even my unexpected moment in the spotlight. I returned to the celebration inside, watching as my family mingled with Imperio members, as barriers between generations dissolved in the shared joy of victory, as the school that had taken a chance on a 78-year-old woman reveled in the validation of their values. Carlos found me again, his face flushed with champagne and happiness. "The committee has already asked if you'll return as Grand Marshal next year. Same theme, of course. We can't change a winning formula." I laughed. "Let me enjoy this year's victory before thinking about next year." Of course," he agreed readily. "But just know that Imperio's doors are always open to you, for as many carnivals as you wish to dance." As the night wore on, I found myself in the center of an impromptu samba circle. Surrounded by dancers of all ages, someone handed me a tambourine, and without thinking, I began to play the rhythm that had been the heartbeat of my life for 60 years. One by one, dancers entered the circle. First the veterans, then the younger members, then children, barely old enough to walk. Each brought their own style, their own interpretation. But all were connected by the fundamental language of samba that transcended age, that united us in a tradition older than any of us, and yet eternally renewed with each performance. In that moment, watching the generations dance together, I understood that what had begun as my personal fight against exclusion had become something much larger, a reaffirmation of Carnival's deepest values, a recommitment to the principle that our cultural traditions belong to everyone, young and old, and that true innovation comes not from discarding the past, but from building upon it with respect and understanding. I had not set out to be a symbol or to start a movement. I had simply wanted to dance, as I had done for 60 years. But sometimes the most personal choices become the most universal statements. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for many others whose voices haven't been heard. As I played my tambourine, watching the dance unfold before me, I felt profoundly grateful for the life that had brought me to this moment, for the family that had supported me through it, for the new community that had welcomed me, and for the unexpected journey that had transformed what could have been an ending into a powerful new beginning. 78 years old, and still I was learning, still growing, still finding new ways to contribute to the Carnival tradition that had shaped my life. There would be more parades, more music, more opportunities to share what I knew and to learn what I didn't. The dance would continue, as it always had, passing from one generation to the next in an unbroken chain of cultural transmission that was the true heart of Carnival. And I would continue to be part of that chain. Not despite my age, but because of it. Because some things improve with time, like fine wine or well-played music. Because wisdom and passion together create a power that neither youth nor experience alone can match. Because samba, like life itself, is not about how many years you have, but about how fully you live each moment, how completely you give yourself to the rhythm, how generously you share the dance with others. They said I was too old for Carnival. They were wrong, and in proving them wrong, I had helped to ensure that no one else would face the same dismissal, the same exclusion, the same failure to recognize that our cultural traditions need all of us, young and old, innovators and preservers, the quick feet of youth and the knowing hearts of elders, to remain vital and meaningful. That was a victory far sweeter than any championship, a legacy far more lasting than any trophy. And as I looked around at the celebration surrounding me, at the joy on faces of all ages, I knew that it was just the beginning. 1 year later, I stood once again in Imperio Tropical's concentration area, watching the familiar organized chaos of Carnival preparations unfold around me. But this time, I was not alone in my role as a senior ambassador of samba tradition. The League of Samba Schools' new guidelines, developed with input from the committee I had advised, required each school to include a Council of Masters comprising veteran performers over the age of 65. These councils weren't just symbolic. They had real input into artistic decisions, choreography, and the preservation of each school's unique traditions. More significantly, the guidelines mandated that each school's parade must include active participation by performers of all ages, with specific roles designed to showcase the talents of veteran sambistas. No more relegating elders to honorary positions in the VIP section. Now they were back where they belonged, in the heart of the parade. The impact had been immediate and profound. Across Rio, veteran performers who had been sidelined in recent years returned to active participation. Schools rediscovered traditional techniques and stylistic elements that had been fading from use. And perhaps most importantly, a new spirit of intergenerational collaboration emerged, with young dancers and musicians actively seeking guidance from their elders. Dona Maria, called a familiar voice, interrupting my reflections. It was Rafael, Imperio's Carnavalesco, hurrying toward me with a tablet in hand. I need your opinion on a last-minute adjustment to the third float. Duh. I smiled, still touched by how genuinely my input was valued here. Show me. As we discussed the technical details of the float design, I marveled at how much had changed in a year. My unexpected journey from rejected veteran to celebrated Grand Marshal had opened doors I never imagined, not just for me, but for an entire generation of Carnival participants. The Oral History Project with Dr. Camilla had expanded beyond our initial vision, growing into a comprehensive digital archive of Carnival traditions, with contributions from hundreds of veteran performers, costume makers, composers, and choreographers. Universities were using it as a teaching resource. Documentary filmmakers had created a series based on our interviews. Even international cultural organizations had taken notice, citing our project as a model for preserving intangible cultural heritage. I had become busier than ever, teaching master classes at samba schools across Rio, giving lectures at cultural conferences, advising the Ministry of Culture on traditional arts programming. At 79, I had more professional opportunities than I'd had at 40. But the most meaningful change had been within the Carnival community itself. The conversation about respecting elders about valuing experience alongside innovation, had taken root in ways both formal and informal. Young choreographers sought out veteran dancers to learn traditional steps before creating new variations. Costume designers studied historical techniques alongside cutting-edge materials. Composers incorporated classic samba rhythms into contemporary arrangements. 10 minutes to procession, called the director, the same announcement I had heard at countless carnivals throughout my life. But this time, it carried a new significance, the beginning of a parade that would demonstrate how tradition and innovation could strengthen rather than oppose each other. I made my way to my position, greeting other performers as I passed. This year, I had chosen a different role, still prominent but less physically demanding than Grand Marshal. I would lead a special wing of veteran dancers, all of us over 70, performing choreography that showcased the elegant precision that comes with decades of experience. As I took my place, I was joined by a familiar figure, Dona Zeze, my oldest friend, now wearing Imperio's emerald and gold instead of Academico's green and white. "Ready for another championship?" she asked with a mischievous smile. "Always," I replied, embracing her carefully to avoid disturbing our costumes, though I think Portela might give us serious competition this year. Zeze wasn't the only former Academicos member who had followed my path to Imperio. After our championship and the implementation of the new guidelines, Paolo had made a show of embracing the changes, creating Academicos Council of Masters with great public fanfare. But behind the scenes, many veterans felt his compliance was grudging at best, his respect superficial. One by one, several had made the difficult decision to leave the school they had served for decades. Some came to Imperio, others went to different schools where they felt truly valued. It was a painful transition for many, but also a powerful statement about the importance of genuine respect rather than token inclusion. Academicos itself had struggled in the aftermath of these departures and our championship victory. Their parade the previous year had placed third, respectable, but a disappointment for a school accustomed to winning. More significantly, they had faced criticism for the mechanical implementation of the new guidelines, fulfilling the letter but not the spirit of the requirements. "Imperio Tropical, prepare to move." The familiar command snapped me back to the present moment. Around me, my fellow veteran dancers, 20 women and men ranging in age from 70 to 84, made final adjustments to their costumes, checked each other's headdresses, exchanged encouraging words. "Remember," I told them, "we're not just performing for the judges or the audience. We're dancing for every elder who was ever told they were too old, too slow, too anything. We're showing what a lifetime of samba wisdom looks like in motion." They nodded, determination and pride evident in their faces. Many had stories similar to mine, of being gradually sidelined, of watching their roles diminish year by year, of being treated as relics rather than resources. This parade was their redemption, as much as it had been mine the previous year. "Imperio Tropical, you have clearance to enter. Begin your procession." The batteria's rhythm propelled us forward, the familiar surge of adrenaline washing through me as we approached the entrance to the Sambadrome. After 61 carnivals, the excitement never diminished. If anything, each parade became more precious, more meaningful, as I grew older. We entered the Sambadrome to thunderous applause, the crowd recognizing our special wing of veteran dancers immediately. Our choreography was different from the more athletic routines of the younger performers. More precise, more elegant, focused on the subtle nuances of traditional samba that only decades of practice could perfect. As we danced down the runway, I caught glimpses of the audience's reactions. Young children pointing in wonder, elderly spectators with tears in their eyes, middle-aged viewers nodding in appreciation of our skill. We were not objects of pity or nostalgia. We were masters demonstrating our craft, elders passing on our knowledge through the universal language of dance. Halfway through the parade route, we reached a special moment in the choreography. A section where our veteran wing was joined by Imperio's youngest dancers. Children aged 6 to 12 from the community samba school I still taught on Saturdays. The symbolism was unmistakable as the children wove between us, sometimes mirroring our movements, sometimes contrasting them with their own exuberant style. This was the visual embodiment of our theme, the circle unbroken, from generation to generation. It wasn't just about honoring elders. It was about the dynamic exchange between young and old, the living transmission of cultural knowledge that kept traditions vibrant and relevant. As we performed this intergenerational dance, I caught sight of my family in their reserved seats. Teresa, Roberto, Eduardo, and their families, all wearing Imperio's colors now. Luisa wasn't with them. She was in the parade herself, having discovered a passion for samba that had lain dormant during her university years. My granddaughter, who had once been focused solely on her business studies, now balanced that career with a deep involvement in carnival culture, serving as a bridge between traditional practices and modern management approaches. The sight of my family supporting this new chapter in our collective story filled me with profound gratitude. Their unwavering belief in me had been the foundation that allowed me to take the risk of leaving Academicos, of starting over at 78, of becoming a reluctant but ultimately effective advocate for change. As our section completed its presentation and continued down the runway, I noticed a group of international visitors in a special viewing area. Representatives from UNESCO and other cultural heritage organizations who had come to witness firsthand the implementation of the new intergenerational approach to Carnival. Their presence was a reminder that what had begun as my personal stand against exclusion had grown into something with global resonance, a model for how traditional cultural expressions could adapt to changing times without losing their essential character. Near the end of the parade route, just before the final judging station, I saw a familiar face in the crowd, Paolo, watching intently as our veteran wing demonstrated the grace and precision that came with decades of practice. Our eyes met briefly, and I thought I detected a mixture of emotions in his expression. Regret, perhaps, for what Academicos had lost, grudging admiration for what Imperio had gained, and maybe, just maybe, a new understanding of the value that experience brings to Carnival. I didn't dwell on his reaction. My focus remained on the performance, on giving everything I had to this moment, on honoring the tradition that had shaped my life while helping to ensure its future. As we completed our final choreographed sequence and moved toward the exit of the Sambadrome, the crowd's response was overwhelming. Sustained applause, cheers, and that now familiar chant, Dona Maria, Dona Maria. But this time, the chant evolved, incorporating the names of other veteran dancers. Zeze, Jorge, Maria. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was a celebration of all the elders who had preserved and developed samba traditions, all the guardians of cultural memory who were finally receiving their due recognition. In the dispersal area, as we caught our breath and accepted congratulations from other performers, I was approached by a television crew doing live coverage of the parade. Dona Maria, the reporter began. Last year you made history as Imperio's Grand Marshal, after being told you were too old to parade with Academicos. Now you've led this special wing of veteran dancers. How does it feel to see the changes you've helped inspire? I considered the question carefully, aware that my answer would be broadcast to millions of viewers across Brazil and beyond. What we're seeing isn't just a change in Carnival, I replied. It's a return to Carnival's true spirit, a celebration that belongs to everyone, that draws strength from the participation of all generations, that honors its past while embracing its future. The new guidelines are important, yes, but more important is the change in mindset, The recognition that our elders aren't burdens to be accommodated, but treasures to be celebrated. And personally, the reporter pressed, how does it feel to be parading at 79? I smiled, feeling the pleasant fatigue in my muscles, the satisfaction of a performance well executed, the joy of sharing this moment with friends old and new. It feels like exactly where I belong, I said simply. Samba has been my life for 61 years now. Why would I stop just because I've added a few more years to my experience? Age changes how I dance, perhaps, but not why I dance. For the joy, for the community, for the connection to something larger than myself. As the interview concluded and we made our way to the changing areas, I was surrounded by the children who had danced with us in the intergenerational section. They peppered me with questions, observations, and the unfiltered enthusiasm of youth. Dona Maria, did you see how I remembered the special step you taught us? Dona Maria, when I'm old like you, will I still be able to dance that well? Dona Maria, my grandmother watched you on TV last year and started samba classes. She's coming to your Saturday school next week. Each comment, each question reinforced what this journey had been about. Not just securing my own place in Carnival, but opening doors for others, creating spaces where age was valued rather than dismissed, building bridges between generations that would keep our cultural traditions alive and evolving. Later that evening, as my family gathered at my home for our post-parade tradition of late dinner and celebration, the conversation turned to the changes of the past year and what might lie ahead. The Ministry of Education has asked if you'd consult on a new cultural heritage curriculum for schools. Teresa informed me, scrolling through emails on her phone. They want to incorporate oral histories from the Archive Project, with you as the lead advisor. And that documentary series has been nominated for a National Film Award, Roberto added. The producer called yesterday. They want you to attend the ceremony next month. Don't forget the International Samba Congress in July, Louisa chimed in. They've asked you to give the keynote address on intergenerational transmission of dance traditions. I laughed, holding up my hands in mock surrender. Enough! Let me enjoy tonight's parade before filling my calendar for the year ahead. But their excitement was infectious, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of anticipation for these new opportunities. At 79, my life was fuller, more purposeful, more connected than it had been in years. What had begun as a painful exclusion had transformed into an unexpected renaissance. Not just for me, but for many others who had found their voices, their places, their value, reaffirmed through the changes we had helped create. As the evening wound down and my family prepared to leave, Eduardo lingered behind, helping me clear the last of the dishes. My oldest son had always been the most reserved, the least demonstrative with his emotions. But tonight he seemed to have something on his mind. What is it, Philo? I asked gently. He set down the plate he was drying and turned to face me. I was just thinking about last year, about how angry I was when Academicos dismissed you, how I wanted to fight them, to demand they reverse their decision. I nodded, remembering his protective outrage. I thought that was the only way to support you, he continued. But you chose a different path, not fighting against the old situation, but creating something new, something better. And look at all that's come from that choice. His words touched me deeply. Sometimes the best response to a closed door isn't to keep knocking, but to find another entrance. Or build your own house, I said. Eduardo smiled. That's what I'm trying to learn from you, Mama. At 54, I've been feeling stuck in my career, frustrated with changes in my industry. But watching you this past year, seeing how you've turned challenge into opportunity, how you've refused to be defined by others' limitations, it's inspired me to make some changes of my own. He explained that he had decided to leave his corporate engineering job to start a social enterprise focused on sustainable housing solutions for low-income communities, combining his technical expertise with a deeper sense of purpose. It's terrifying, he admitted. Starting over at my age, but then I think of you. Parading in the Samba-drome at 79, reinventing yourself, creating new possibilities not just for yourself, but for others. And suddenly, my own transition seems not just possible, but necessary. I embraced him, deeply moved by this unexpected ripple effect of my journey. The best transformations are those that inspire others to discover their own courage, I told him. I'm so proud of you for listening to your heart. After Eduardo left, I sat alone on my balcony, looking out at the nighttime panorama of Rio, the same view I had contemplated the night before, my first parade with Imperio. When everything had seemed so uncertain, now, a year later, I could trace the remarkable path that had unfolded from that moment of crisis. The personal triumph of finding a new home at Imperio. The public conversation about respecting elders that had led to concrete policy changes. The cultural heritage projects that were preserving and transmitting traditional knowledge. And perhaps most meaningfully, the individual stories of renewal and courage that had been inspired along the way. My thoughts turned to Antonio, as they often did in quiet moments. What would he think of all that had happened? I could almost hear his deep laugh, feel his hand on my shoulder, sense his pride in what we had accomplished. For it was we still. His memory and influence woven through every step of my journey. We did it, meu amor, I whispered to the night air. We showed them that the dance never ends as long as the music plays in your heart. As if in response, a warm breeze swept across the balcony, carrying the distant sound of drums from some late-night celebration. The heartbeat of Rio, the pulse of samba that had been the constant rhythm of my life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new dances to learn and teach. The results of tonight's competition would be announced. Championships would be won and lost. Plans for next year's carnival would begin almost immediately. The cycle would continue, as it had for centuries, each generation adding its own verses to the ongoing song of Brazilian cultural identity. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not an ending, but a fulfillment. A recognition that my life's journey had arrived at a place of unexpected grace. At 79, I had found not just a new role for myself, but had helped create new possibilities for others, had contributed to reshaping how my culture valued its elders, had demonstrated that passion and purpose recognized no age limits. They said I was too old for carnival. In proving them wrong, I had helped to ensure that no one else would face that same dismissal, that same exclusion, that same failure to recognize that our cultural traditions need all of us, young and old, innovators and preservers, the quick feet of youth and the knowing hearts of elders, to remain vital and meaningful. The samba would continue, passed from generation to generation, in an unbroken circle of cultural transmission. And I would continue to be part of that circle, teaching, learning, performing, advocating, for as many carnivals as life granted me. Because some things improve with time, like fine wine or well-played music. Because wisdom and passion together create a power that neither youth nor experience alone can match. Because samba, like life itself, is not about how many years you have, but about how fully you live each moment, how completely you give yourself to the rhythm, how generously you share the dance with others. This was the lesson of my unexpected journey from rejection to renewal, from exclusion to celebration, from being told I was too old to becoming a living symbol of the value of age and experience. It was a lesson I would continue to embody with every step, every dance, every carnival yet to come. The night deepened around me, stars appearing above the city lights. In a few hours, the sun would rise on a new day, bringing with it new possibilities, new challenges, new opportunities to share the wisdom of 61 years of samba. I was ready for whatever came next, confident in the knowledge that the dance would continue, that the circle remained unbroken, that the rhythm of life would carry us all forward together, young and old, past and present, tradition and innovation intertwined in the eternal, evolving celebration that is Carnival. And in that knowledge, there was peace, there was purpose, there was the profound joy that comes from living authentically, from standing up for your value, from transforming personal challenge into collective opportunity. They said I was too old for Carnival. They were wrong. And in proving them wrong, I had found my truest self, my deepest purpose, my most meaningful contribution to the culture that had shaped my life. The dance continues, and so do I.